Okay, I'm going to let you go live now.
Okay.
Good evening. Good evening. This is August 3rd, 2020. You are listening to the new WCEG network on WCEGTalkRadio.com. If you can get there, just click the live stream tab, or you can watch us on smart TV, not your dumb TV, but your smart TV at YouTube, WCEG Network. I am Norman A. Carter Jr., your host of the special edition of Issues and Answers. We are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and on Instagram, we are at WCEG underscore talk underscore radio or at WCEG network. And just a little disclaimer, the topics and opinions are mine or our illustrious guest and not the WCEG network. So thank you for your continued support. Thank you for listening in. Our special program today is entitled COVID-19 versus Legal Representation for the Indigent. And we have a stellar star panel with us. And by way of brief introduction, I'll do that immediately. We have attorney Dennis Francis Jr. Counselor Francis is the director of the Metro Conflict Defenders since July 2009. That's a state-level indigent defense agency representing persons charged with felony matters in Fulton County. He's the deputy director of the Georgia Capitol Defender Atlanta Satellite Office from 2007 to 2009, representing persons charged with cases for which the state is seeking the death penalty. The senior trial attorney, Georgia Capitol Defender and Fulton County Public Defender, 1999 to 2007, a graduate of Howard U. School of Law and Morehouse College, 1989. Also, we have with us attorney Maranda Jernigan. Counselor Jernigan is an attorney with the Atlanta Judicial Circuit Fulton County Public Defender's Office. She is a member in good standing of the Georgia Bar Association and a member of the Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys. After earning her Juris Doctorate from Mercer University, she started her legal career as an assistant district attorney for the Tallapoosa Circuit DA's office. She has spent the last 17 years providing zealous, effective, ethical representation to indigent people accused of crimes in Fulton County. We also have with us Miss Demita Chapman. And just so I can catch my breath, I'm going to allow her to introduce herself. Ms. Chapman?
Hi, yes, I live in South Fulton, in the new city of South Fulton, and I'm with Citizens for Excellence in Elected Leaders. And I want to thank the radio host for having us on the show tonight.
Thank you for being with us. And last but certainly not least, we have Judge Melynee Leftridge Harris. A little brief bio. As a longtime Fulton County resident, Judge Harris proudly serves her local community on the board of directors of Covenant Community Incorporated. That's a residential life stabilization program for men experiencing homelessness and substance abuse issues. This is a ministry of All Saints Episcopal Church in Atlanta. She formerly served 2 terms on the board of directors of Southside Medical Center, which is a community health care facility serving an economically challenged population. She is very active in many professional and civic organizations and has held leadership positions with them. Now, Judge Harris is on a leave of absence from her judgeship as she is running for office as the magistrate, as for the State Superior Court of Fulton County. But she's joining us today as a facilitator for our conversations and questions. Questions will not be directed to her directly, but to our star panel of attorneys. And we'll start off. I did have a little comment from Judge Harris, if you please.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here and hosting this, Mr. Carter and Mr. Mina Chapman and Reverend Penny Rogers. We are now in our 4th extension of the statewide judicial emergency put in place by Chief Justice Harold Melton of the Georgia Supreme Court. And that has affected our court facilities all around the state significantly. And the details of the order, it's a multi-page order, but significance in it is the fact that we are having no convening of any jury trials, that be the grand jury as well as regular jurors, for safety reasons, obviously. The courthouse is not shut down, but it is different in the sense that safety measures have been put into place. Of the most benign safety measures, we have 4 people on the elevator at a time. We are taking temperatures before people come into the courthouse. There is designated seating in the gallery for people who come to court so that they're 6 feet apart. Each courtroom is now dressed with screens, like we're seeing at cashier stations, plexiglass, so that safety measures are adhered to with respect to distancing and people in court. And there has been some fluctuation along the way as needed, as the numbers change. We tried to open up a little bit and then had to kind of retreat from opening up. And so we ebb and flow with the numbers and with what is happening at the jail and what is happening with respect to the courthouse and its employees. So thank you again for the opportunity to be a part of this panel discussion. I'm excited about it. I know Mr. Francis and Ms. Jernigan very well. They have come through my courtroom over the years, and I'm excited for what it is they have to offer with respect to representing their client in this pandemic environment that we find ourselves in.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. I'd like to start off this question, throw this question out to our panel about how specifically does this affect, and I'll just steer it towards focus on our juveniles community, those are juveniles who are incarcerated. How does the COVID pandemic affect their legal cases? And I can open it up to either one of you.
I don't mind going first, Miranda. The effect that it's had upon the youth in our community is the fact that the cases are pretty much, everything is frozen in time. So under normal circumstances where a juvenile is arrested, let's say for a crime where they would be charged as an adult, then if they are incarcerated pending that case, they would have to have that case charged formally by a grand jury within 90 days or granted a bond. But since those provisions have been stayed, effectively, they are, for lack of a better word, in limbo, just sort of waiting. And we know what effect that has on a very young person. So I've spent a lot of my time during the COVID fielding calls from upset community members that they just have to wait, and it's unfortunate, but it's not the fault of Justice Melton, the Supreme Court, or Georgia Superior Court. It's just the tax that the pandemic has had upon our community.
The 90-day rule is not just for juveniles, it's for anyone, and especially someone that's not their first time in jail. They know the 90-day rule, and they're looking and calling and having their mama call and their sister call and their cousins call. I've been in here 90 days. I get a bond. I know this rule, and nothing is being explained to the client, at least short of that no longer applies, because like Dennis said, we can't hold the point of the rule is to make sure that the district attorney moves the case forward, that it doesn't stay in limbo. But the issue that we're having right now is that you're having to try to balance due process with public safety, and we don't have any precedents to go by. And these people are, juveniles is detrimental, but adults who have mortgages and rent and families that they're providing for are not getting their day in court. And, especially now looking at losing everything pending formal charging of the case even.
That's devastating. That's devastating. I would also like to maybe just throw one thing out there because I've had some experience with SSI. Those people would also have serious problems in getting SSI benefits. Am I correct?
My understanding, and I'm no Social Security expert,
Right.
but my understanding is if you are a recipient of Social Security income, that check stops if you're incarcerated, and it doesn't start again until you're released from custody. So the delay has, I'm sure, having devastating effects in that respect.
I was more or less thinking about the people in the application process. And how,
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. That's not. I have no experience with that. But the pandemic has slowed down a number of aspects because people are working from home. So I would imagine it's touched and concerned that as well.
and then we're also going to have a problem with discovery motions, suppression motions, appeals, defense witnesses.
Right. Yeah, everything is in logjam, and it's going to take a considerable amount of time to work through it. We struggle to work through our normal caseload just because it's hard to juggle or coordinate everyone's schedule. So you may want to have a hearing, but this officer has vacation, or this expert is in another case. So it's difficult in and of itself just to get a regular caseload processed. Now we have a caseload that's been effectively on hold since March because we can't have those hearings on motions to suppress. We can't have those dispositive motions where we need to be in the courtroom and we need to cross-examine witnesses. So we've got to come back when we eventually come back and start to process those cases that we had in the system from March of this year, in some cases that were still in the system from last year. So there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done to process these cases effectively when we return.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there and thinking that this current logjam will probably affect us for several months to come, even after the COVID-19 crisis ends.
I imagine that it's going to be all the way into next year. If we see a jury trial before the spring of next year, we'll be doing good, I think. Alice, would you agree, Dennis and Miranda? We're almost halfway through this year. The numbers are still rising. We anticipate that there may be another extension. That's highly likely. And we don't know how many more may come. So I would like to interject, if I could, Mr. Carter, and ask
Yes.
Mr. Francis and Ms. Jernigan, when your clients come to you and they're saying, look, what about me? What exactly are you offering them? What are you saying to them, to the extent that you can share it with us, generally? What are you telling the families? What are you telling your clients about the situation?
I think it's always better to be direct about it. I don't want to beat around the bush when I don't want your expectations to be that you're going to have another bond hearing after first appearance in 30 days when I have over 200 clients in custody right now, unindicted. And the people that have been there 30 days are calling me saying, when is my next court date? And I'm explaining that there's people that are in since April that haven't had a bond hearing, because it's just, we're figuring it out, and Zoom is great. And I don't want to appear as though I'm shifting any kind of blame, but there's been tremendous efforts on every side trying to make this work and figure out how we can effectively move these cases and have these people appear before a court or considered for a bond by someone that has the authority to grant it, whether that's the district attorney by consent or a judge. But I have become very realistic with my explanation, and that you're on my radar. I'm doing everything I can do, but unfortunately, that's not a whole lot, just with what we have to operate in right now.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And from my experience, and I don't have the same experience currently that Maranda has, because I'm more in a supervisory role. I have a few clients.
Dennis is the boss
at this point in time, but I do feel calls from family members, and I can't say this. Family members and the clients that I have spoken to have been understanding of the process. And, you know, the judges have worked very hard in Fulton County to try to process and get the people out that we can get out. So to the extent that there's a case that we can work out, well, you know, you can call up a judge and you can get on a Zoom call and we can get that case worked out, and we can either get that person a bond, or if that person wants to resolve their case by a reasonable plea, the judges have worked very hard to try to help us do that. But it's those cases where, especially I find it more with the juveniles, of course, because they're just sort of in limbo, and sort of the more serious cases in Fulton County, where those people are starting to get frustrated, and I understand their frustration. All we can do is say, we understand your frustration, but in fairness to you, we just can't have essential hearings by Zoom. It will not work if we're trying to convince the fact finder, who would be the judge in the hearing, about the credibility of the witness. We just don't think Zoom would be as an effective medium to highlight a credibility issue.
Right. I agree with that. I think that the Zoom technology is with us from henceforward, and there's a lot to be said about the benefit of, but we may lose some of the human energy you get when you're in the room with somebody else and you pick up on the senses that you get from being in the same space with someone else. And when we are talking about suppression hearings and issues related to credibility of witnesses, that energy between people in the same room that is part of one of the variables in whether or not someone is telling you the truth or not. So I do think that this is going to be something that we have to work on going forward for sure. Yeah.
Would add to that in regards to what Dennis was saying about the juveniles. I find that especially the case with the 17, 18, 19, because when you're reading a police report, it's X, but then when you have this child that walks out standing next to you, that as a mother, Dennis has seen me, I'll cry over I can't do the teenagers. Like they, because I'm a mother of sons, and I'm like, that could be my son standing there. Like, and I'm looking at this angel face and I'm reading this police report and I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, there's no way that any of that can be, in my opinion, conveyed via Zoom or any kind of social media or video.
I was thinking, I think that we can only hope that the technology will improve, you know what I mean, to give us more than what we have now. But I agree, there's nothing like being in the same room with somebody else and picking up. So
yeah, Zoom is effective when all the parties are on the same page.
Correct.
And we need to do a perfunctory, let's get this bond order issued, or let's do this consent. We all agree to a probated sentence. Let's do this plea. And I think to that extent, Zoom will probably be with us going forward, for those matters where we agree. But for the contested matters, we need live and in person, and that's just the way it's been in the law throughout all of time.
work in progress, but I find too that courtroom etiquette, which I know most attorneys don't, but some attorneys struggle with. It is especially difficult for those people not to take advantage during Zoom hearings and just start talking. And I'm like, it's not your turn. I didn't talk while you were talking. Don't talk while I'm talking.
Are you referring to one of my people?
Say that.
Not at all. Not at all.
In the fourth order, there is a paragraph that talks about professionalism. Professionalism needs to extend throughout this with respect to lawyers and how they present,
Right.
calls and whatnot.
Right. Because you think you're talking and you think this is a conversation that's somewhat limited between 2 or 3 people. And then all of a sudden someone else's square is lighting up. And I'm like, wait, who's talking now?
I think that, and I don't want our listeners to lose track of the fact that all of you are not only seasoned professionals, but you are lifelong committed to the cause of indigent people. So at some point, this has to be heartbreaking for all of you.
I'm having anxiety, and I'm not an anxiety person. I wake up in the middle of the night worrying about everything. I will get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and start just trying to look through and see who it is that I can, because they're stuck. They're stuck in limbo. Dennis nailed it. Like there's some, and there's so many right now that there's no way to ensure, without just staying up 24 hours a day, that I'm making sure that everybody is being checked on equally. And you've been in for 6 months, but you've been in 30 days, but you've got a very good issue that needs to be heard. But how do I convince somebody to put you ahead of the guy that's been in there for months and months? Has been one of the biggest struggles that I have found. And I will give a shout out to some of the district attorneys. I feel have gone above and beyond trying to assist and facilitate getting those people out that have the substantive issues that we're not getting heard on addressed prior to their turn in line.
That is true. A lot of personnel on all different sides have worked hard. And I know people think on the outside, it's like TV and we just fight with each other, and that's not true. There are a lot of good DAs, and they try very hard to work with public defenders and private lawyers to do what's right, which is to get people out who need to be out. There are a number of people, sitting in the jail just because they don't have $300. So they work very hard to try to get them out. It's not, and whose cases can be resolved simply. And the judges have been great about saying, just call us. We will set up Zoom. That's the good part about Zoom. We can set it up quickly, and we can get your client out of the jail, which is the goal, which is to get your client out of the jail. So
I think we have a question for Ms. Chapman. Would you?
Yes. The question I have is, what happened to the people that get arrested during COVID-19, just say during this protest, and when they go to jail, would that stay on their record, or how would you get that off of the records? Because some of the kids, I say the young adults, or even the kids, they don't have a record. So how would you guys get this off of their record? Because what I was hearing was, if they did something, it will follow them. So how would that affect the young generation, anybody that don't have a record?
Well, there's a process for expungement of an arrest, which the prosecutor has sort of championed. And so there is a process. And I don't know, I haven't dealt with any of those cases myself, and so I'm not sure, but I would imagine that most of those cases were reduced down to the simplest misdemeanor, if not dismissed. And they can go in and petition to have that basically removed from their record. So we haven't had any of those directly in my office. We just deal with the felony matters when there's a conflict case. But I would imagine, they can petition the court, petition the prosecutor's office or the solicitor's office, Mr. Keith Gamage's office, to have that removed if it's in Fulton County.
Okay, thank you.
And they're very proactive about helping people to get that expunged too.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I know most of you deal with criminal matters, but I had a concern about domestic violence issues where a victim is seeking some sort of relief and seeking the resources of an attorney. That seems to me that would be problematic at a time like this, especially for someone who's indigent and not able to afford to go out and hire an attorney to represent them.
We will be appointed to you if that's the case. But my cases are typically the ones, I mean, there's exceptions to it, but basically I represent people in cases where they're alleged to have hurt someone else. And that would be one of those laws that I represent people on allegedly breaking. And
okay.
Those numbers, I think, have gone up over the pandemic, over the shelter in place.
Yes.
I saw another concerning, I don't know statistic because I don't know the actual numbers, but someone had pointed out that child abuse was down. And I was like, oh, it's sad. I don't think it is probably. It's more along the lines of our children aren't in school and they're not mandated reporters seeing what's going on.
Correct.
That I think is definitely something that's affecting or is affected by COVID as well.
I'd like to know, Ms. Jernigan, specifically from you and maybe from you too, Mr. Francis, the relationship that the public defenders has, which is really good with your own social services, your social worker, Mr. Fletcher comes to mind in your office. How has the pandemic affected the relationship between you, your clients, and the opportunity for social services, wraparound services?
We're having issues now because of the rise in numbers again. There's a lot of facilities that aren't accepting people that we have. I mean, you mentioned homelessness at the very beginning. That's absolutely our clients at many times. And a lot of times the homelessness is a result of the mental health issues that, they become adults and no one can control them. And they essentially end up homeless, either self-medicating with street drugs or, just out there, a risk to themselves and possibly others. We have an amazing social work team with our office. I would say the best in the state, honest. They're so impressive. But the numbers are just incredible. And we're not, we're limited on bond hearings. It's difficult. I am having difficulty, especially with the recent, there's been some numbers increase at the jail. I can't get releases of information because HIPAA requires them to say that I get to look at their records. And so I have to get them to sign it. Well, I can't get it to them because they're in quarantine. And so I can't even produce the medical records I need to make the arguments I need to make for them. So there's been, again, I'm like, for every negative thing, there's been a positive, like the jail staff, the medical team. There's been many medical staff at the jail that have reached out to our social workers, to me directly, that, this client is having this issue and would like assistance here, and has, I've emailed her the release of information, and he or she has presented it to my client and put he or she on the phone with me so that I could explain what this is and what you're giving me permission to do, to try to get these people placed, because jail's not where they need to be. And that's always what you hear from the family. And we all agree, it's just, we're not in a posture right now to effectively place them for one reason or another.
Right, I agree. That's very well stated. Just an additional layer of difficulty that the pandemic has created. It's this ripple effect, and I think what we run up against too is when your social workers contact these places, they're a little less than enthusiastic to receive somebody that's coming out of the jail. you know, because of the spread in the jail. And the jails are, for lack of a better phrase, they become super spreader environments. So, you know, it's just another part of the you know, another domino that's been set in motion because of
To that end, Mr. Francis, this is a great segue. Can you talk a little bit about what happens when you all go to the jail? The protocol is for you and seeing your clients, talking with your clients, given the COVID environment?
Well, personally, I went about 10 days ago, and the protocol was pretty much the same as it all. You know, you have to have a mask
Right.
to come in, and that's, you know, and then you have, they installed the new temperature taking facial recognition software when you come in. And so they take your temperature and they see who you are, and you have to have a mask and you go in. Everything else was pretty much standard. I went up to the 7th floor, I believe, which is the most secure floor, but I didn't notice anything different. They gave me the key and I went up and I talked to the client. So other than taking the temperature and the mask, everything else was the same.
We're talking with the, you know, the super spreader of the zone format that the jail cells are created. The alternative, the flip side, and the impact that it has is they're having to be in a lockdown situation a lot more than they would otherwise, and so it's made a bad place worse, in the sense of they're having to stay in their individual cells and not even come out, but you know, for very limited time because of the social distancing and trying to follow all the guidelines that still apply even inside of Fulton County Jail. But I was at Union City this morning. The South Fulton Annex is where they house the females, and it was business as usual. You know, but one at a time, and you know, clearing everybody out and not being anywhere near one another. It's just, I can't imagine being inside of the cell for the hours that they're having to be inside the cell. It's bad enough to be in jail, but to have to be within the tiny little room where you got a roommate and that small of a square footage is. I'll be honest, I'm surprised there's not more fights like being reported from the jail because that's got to be trying on anybody's nerves and just emotional stability.
That was just a question that came to mind because a lot of what we're talking about is getting people moved through the system, and the system is obviously backed up. But has anyone brought up the discussion of perhaps getting additional state and federal funding to increase your staff, not only to increase your staff, but also to perhaps even increase the operational hours of our court system so that we can begin to move people faster through the system?
Well, I don't, it's fundamentally really not a staffing or a resource issue. It's, you know, the practice of law, with the exception of the last 10 years, has been an in-person practice. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, and without the citizens in our community to, you know, to be able to come down and sit on a case and pass judgment on a case, we can't really effectively, we can't make the cake. You know, they're the flour. Okay. We can't make the cake. So you could give us money for more flour, but we can't buy it and bring it down. So, I mean, you know, I mean, it's what we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. You know, we got to have these constitutionally mandated motions and procedures. And I'm just not going to have it and ask Judge Brasher or Judge Russell to make a judgment based on looking at a 3-inch window on Zoom. It's the reason why the witness stand is right next to where the judge is. There's a reason for that, because the judge has to evaluate how this person is testifying, their manner, their mode. And this person may be answering the question and tapping their foot in a violent fashion. You can't see that on Zoom. There's a number of different things you wouldn't be able to see, the tics that someone would have while they're testifying. Zoom won't pick that up. You need to be there. And there's something about the pressure of being in the room with other people that the law has determined that this is the best way to get at the truth. And that's what we're about, is getting at the truth. And cross-examination and viewing someone close and face-to-face is the best way to get at the truth. We're just sort of in this posture where until we can get back into that mode where we're face-to-face, we have to find a better way. So I just don't think it's a resource issue or a staffing issue. Our people are ready to go. They're ready to get back to what they do.
Logistically, before the pandemic, we were having calendars where we had 40 in custody defendants on a calendar. And there's a big bus that brings them over, and there's a big bus that takes them now, or takes them back. But I know they're trying to get face-to-face probable cause hearings back up and running. And there's going to be 4 a day as opposed to 40.
Ooh.
And because of safety, and the defendants have, they have safety concerns as well. And you can't put them 2 on a seat or 3 on a seat in a bus and move them back and forth from the jail and back to the jail, and then wonder who's exposed who on the bus to potential COVID issues. So
and that's also true for the holding cell in the courthouse.
Right.
The bus brings them in and puts them downstairs in that holding cell, and then we've got that elevator system, moving them up and down, and sharing the system with the varying courtrooms on the side and keeping them apart.
Now, I will say this, Mr. Carter, when we get through this pandemic, yes, we will need some additional staffing.
That's actually what I was speaking of. That's actually where I was speaking of. That's a good point once we get through it. But yeah, the focus right now is trying to get us to that point. But yes, to dig ourselves out of this hole that of no fault of anybody here or the defendants or the judicial system. We have to dig ourselves out of that hole. And that's where, as Miranda said earlier, we could use Zoom. We can still effectively use Zoom to move some of the matters along and maybe hold later hours and things like that. So maybe going forward, we could use some funding, but people are ready to go. And once we get it back up and running, we're going to we're going to work as hard as we have to work to process the cases. I see. Great. Thank you. See if I have any other questions here. And I think Your Honor brought up something that I think is very important going on right now. We're talking about witness credibility. And as you know, as time goes on, witness credibility seems to be more questionable. People's memories fade, and that may be an unintended consequence of this COVID-19, especially for criminal proceedings.
Yeah, it's going to work to the detriment of both sides on a case-by-case basis. There will be witnesses that we need that we can't locate. There'll be witnesses that the state needs and they can't locate. Victims will become disinterested because of the time it takes to process. I mean, cases have to be processed expeditiously for a reason. People have to believe in the system. A victim has to believe that when I call the police and make a charge, that this is going to go through the system in a relatively not fast fashion, but in a smooth and expeditious fashion. And the defendants need to believe that you're not just going to tuck me away in the jail and forget about me for a few years. and then say, oh, well, we forgot about you, go home.
Right.
So, you know, people are losing, people will lose confidence in the system. So there will be detriments to both sides as a result of the delay.
You know, you brought up a good point earlier, both of you, and in shouting out your opposing side, the prosecutors, that they, I guess in justice too, are collaborative with you, most of them at least, in trying to move the cases that can move. Would you say that that is in the lion's share of the cases that you all have together, or what's the percentage issue, if one can be placed on it? In other words, are you able to resolve fairly easily with the other side, your other side, 50% of the cases that you each come across? I know you're in a supervisory capacity, Mr. Francis, but Ms. Jernigan, do you have a feel for that?
I don't think it's fair to put a number on it, because I think that there are a particular few that have the authority to give me what I want if they think it's right to do. And those few, for the most part, have gone above and beyond. They've called me at 8 o'clock at night when they're still at the office checking emails, and they've just got to the request I sent them at 8:30 this morning. And those in particular, I can't say enough about how helpful they have been. Like, even I had one in particular, she walked well, there's been several, have walked bonds over to judges for my client because I was working from home, and he or she agreed that it needed to happen today, and have very much facilitated where they can. The issue is that they're not always in a position where they're able to consent to stuff for one reason or another. Either an office policy or just the situation, or the victim is very adamant against bond, and so they can't consent to it. It's going to have to be heard, and so then we're kind of jockeying for a position on a calendar that's limited because of the whole safety issue, and you can only have so many people congregating. So I wouldn't put a number on it, but the ones that are helping are tremendous right now. Like,
is that the feedback you're getting, Mr. Francis, from the people?
Right. Yeah. No, they're on the cases where they can help, they're being very helpful. But even when we didn't have the pandemic, there's a certain class of cases that are not going to be processed expeditiously. The more serious cases just have to get to the point where the jurors are there before we could even attempt to resolve the cases. So that's never going to change. But the lower level cases, and I'm sure a lot of the misdemeanor cases, but again, we're just handling felonies. So the lower level felony cases, the simple drug possessions, things like that. Yes, I mean, that prosecutor's office has always been pretty good about working with people and trying to process people's cases expeditiously. We just have so many cases that, you know, just by the nature of the number of cases that we have, it takes a while for them to work through the system.
I want to ask you all that is gender-based. I want to know, because, you know, you all handle cases involving both men and women as defendants. Do you find across the board that there is some variable that you see as a trend with either, or difference, generally speaking, in the way you are having to process the cases based on gender, or how they're responding to COVID, your clients, or not?
I don't think I've seen it per se. I mean, with few exceptions, typically my female clients have less record. Typically, there's exceptions to that, but I feel most of my female clients have a fair shot of getting a bond granted, but I don't know that they've been treated any differently. based on their gender. It's typically that it's based on their record. That, you know, I don't think that a male with their record would be treated any differently than the female.
And I'm not talking from a judicial standpoint. I guess that I'm talking about their response to COVID and being incarcerated, or what you say to them with respect to their individual needs. Is that impacted in any way?
I don't think, I haven't found that it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't been made aware of any difference. I mean, the facility that the ladies are housed in is I think it's better than where the men are housed, but they're operating under the same conditions. But I haven't been informed of any issues by any of the lawyers that I supervise.
I will say this, the jail has a system set up now that we send a log in ahead of time of who we would like to speak to at what time. And the client calls us at our desk, so that it's kind of, because we can't always go in person to the jail for, you know, health and safety and all of that. That's not happening at the South Annex at this point. I was informed, and I didn't realize this because I've had so many medical staff that have helped in so many ways and put people on the phone for me, just trying to make sure that everybody's needs are met. But the Securus log thing that they have going at Rice Street is not set up at the annex yet. So I do feel that in that respect, the females are a little bit more limited in their ability to reach out to their attorney, at least with our office, with that secure system that's set up.
Very good. I think we're really closing in probably to the last 5 minutes of our program. And rather than try to run over, I'd like to throw it out for any comments that any of you might have in reference to what we're experiencing now with COVID-19 and indigent legal representation.
I'll start. I'll say this, that I think it's important for us to recognize, and I think we all do, that although we are in a significantly challenging time with this overarching COVID pandemic, that we still have people whose due process rights need to be addressed. And Ms. Jernigan and Mr. Francis do a yeoman's job, or have, as I've known them over the years, in putting their clients first in all manners. And so I'm encouraged, strangely enough, that even though we're going through this challenge, that we have attorneys like Mr. Francis and Ms. Jernigan who will do whatever it takes to make sure that the lives of their clients are not impaired more greatly than they need to be with this going on. And so that's the good side of it, that we've got good lawyers working on behalf of so many who need it. And I'm appreciative of that a great deal. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Jernigan or Mr. Francis, either one.
You can go ahead, Miranda.
If for any family that are listening, hopefully many, I would want everyone to know that we do care. It is just, the volume is insane right now. And because we are so limited in what we can do as lawyers, I've become really great at calling people back, because it's about all I can do is call back and at least say, I've got you. I know your child or your brother or whoever it is. Like, I know their case. I'm working on it. I've got them on the list. I'm trying to get to them. And I think Dennis mentioned it earlier, but so many of the families have been so incredibly understanding, more so than I think I might even be in this situation, because it's been since March for some of these people, and their case has not really moved since the day that they were arrested. And it's not the DA's fault, and it's not the judge's fault, but it's not their fault either. And due process is really what all of us are all about, and they're not getting it. So it's a hard balance to strike because, you know, we're saying give them due process, but don't give them to them Zoom because Zoom doesn't do it, and it doesn't do it. Like it's not the same over Zoom. But just we're working on it. We're trying. We are going to get to everybody like as fast as we can. It just may not be fast enough for some people, but you know, our office is amazing. Conflict defender Dennis's office is amazing, and to not have a roadmap, I'm very impressed with our supervisors like Dennis, Ms. Markowitz, Ms. Woods. They in our office, they have just really pulled everything together in such a quick fashion to try to make sure that everyone's needs are met. I just wanted to give the shout out before we say goodbye.
I think before we close, Ms. Chapman might just have one question. Did you?
Yes, I think this was a great show. I mean, great information. I can't wait for people to look at it. And I want to have another one with you guys. I think this was great information. And some of the information that you guys talked about, that's what I am hearing from, I say, the street committee. So great. Let me ask you a question. What happened to the cases that's 1 or more years that haven't come before you guys, like for the district attorney? Do you throw the case out, or what do you do with those cases?
We don't get to throw them out. We'd throw a bunch of them out if we had that option.
Okay, great. Great, thank you guys.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the panel. I want to make a comment again that these are just not seasoned professionals. These are people who actually care about the lives of the people in their community. They don't work 9 to 5 or 10 to 6. Sometimes they're all day long, all day, and they get very little sleep. And obviously, as you've seen, there's a lot of worry, a lot of stress involved in what they do and how they choose to serve the communities that they cherish. I want to thank the entire panel, Councilor Francis, Councilor Jernigan, Honorable Judge Harris, Ms. Chapman. I'd really like to thank you all for giving us some information that doesn't seem to be too well publicized. And for our listeners, these concerns and problems and resolutions that they've presented to us are not just endemic to the metro Atlanta area, but they can be extrapolated to the entire country. The entire country is affected by COVID-19 and its effect on indigent peoples across this land. So I want to take this opportunity once again to thank you all for joining our program on the WCEG network. You have been commendable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How to